If you can fix it, you can keep it. The words sliced through the vaulted atrium like a cold gust off the Hudson. Sharp dismissive meant to humiliate. Evelyn Carrington didn't raise her voice. She never had to. The way she said it, measured, flippant, perfectly enunciated, was enough to make the marble echo with discomfort. The Orpheus music box sat silent on its velvet pedestal, stubborn in its refusal to perform. All eyes turned to the janitor crouched nearby, wiping a smudge from the black and gold tiles of Meliora Heritage Holdings' grand lobby. He looked up slowly. Wesley Thorne was not what you'd expect from a man in overalls. Tall, broad-shouldered, weathered hands, calm, unreadable eyes that had seen too much and spoke too little. There was something old-world about him, like he belonged in another time when men built things that lasted. He didn't answer the challenge, didn't flinch at the laughter murmuring from the polished shoes and silk scarves of the visiting East Asian investment delegation. Instead, he stood. One hand rested on the handle of his cleaning cart. The other reached into a worn leather pouch hanging from his hip. He unrolled a canvas bundle with quiet reverence, revealing a curious mix of tools, some new, some antique, and one that looked like it belonged in a watchmaker's drawer. "Is this part of the tour?" one of the delegates whispered, amused. Evelyn didn't blink. "Apparently, our janitorial staff thinks he's qualified for restoration." Still, she didn't stop him. Maybe she didn't think he'd succeed. Maybe she wanted to watch him fail. Wesley approached the Orpheus box as though it were something sacred, not a broken trinket. The intricate brass mechanism had frozen mid-spin, caught between centuries. Dust lined the edges. The winding key refused to turn. A lesser man would have forced it. Wesley didn't. He knelt, studied the underside, tapped lightly near the worn emblem. Then he reached back into his pouch and removed a tiny T-shaped pick, slid it in beneath the panel with surgeon-like precision. A soft click. A gear shifted. A second passed. Then another. And then click. The box whirred softly to life. A melody spilled into the space, fragile, ancient, beautiful. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It drifted upward like incense wrapping around the marble pillars and glass ceilings, flooding every corner of the atrium with a music that sounded like it remembered how to breathe. And then something no one expected happened. A little girl stepped out from behind the janitor's cart. She couldn't have been more than 8. Auburn curls tied back in a messy ponytail. Overalls 2 sizes too big. Barefoot. Without a word, she lifted one arm, then the other, and began to dance. Not like a child. Not like someone mimicking TikTok trends. She moved like someone who felt the music, who knew where it came from. Her steps were unpolished but poetic small turns, slow dips of waltz that had no partner but gravity. Silence fell across the entire room. A woman in heels lowered her phone mid-scroll. One of the investors adjusted his glasses, mesmerized. Evelyn stood still, spine straight as a violin bow, fingers clenched so tight her nails pressed crescent moons into her palm. The melody ended with a soft chime. The girl bowed, awkward, innocent. Wesley stood, packed his tools away with care. He didn't say a word, just took the little girl's hand and turned to leave. Evelyn found her voice. "That wasn't authorized," she snapped. Wesley paused, looked over his shoulder. "Neither was the silence," he said softly. She stared at him. "That box is worth more than your entire annual salary. You don't get to parade your child like some street act." "She wasn't performing," he replied, tone even. "She was responding. And the box. You said I could keep it." A flicker of a smile, so faint it could have been imagined, touched the corner of his mouth before he turned and walked away. The delegation remained frozen. Finally, one of them chuckled. "Is he part of the museum package?" the woman asked lightly. "Because that was the most authentic moment I've seen all week." Evelyn didn't answer. She was staring at the little girl's footprints, bare, dusty imprints across the pristine black marble. as if music had walked through the building and dared someone to remember it. That night, Evelyn Carrington stared at the Orpheus box under her office lamp. She had ordered it shipped up immediately, unable to leave it in the janitor's care even if she had technically offered it. She tried to make it play again. Nothing. She opened the base. No clue how he had done it. She slammed it shut and pushed it aside, pouring herself a neat scotch. Ice clinked against glass as she stepped out onto the balcony of her 45th floor corner office. Below, the lights of Manhattan blinked like indifferent stars. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Somewhere in the shadows of her memory, an old voice whispered, "One wrong note. Evelyn, and you ruin the whole movement." Her father's voice. Brutal. Exacting. A symphony conductor with hands like razors and love measured in metronome ticks. She had shattered her violin against the fireplace the night he refused to clap after her solo recital. She hadn't touched music since. A knock at the door. Her assistant wide-eyed. "Ma'am, the board just saw the clip. It's gone viral. Over 2 million views in 2 hours. What clip? The janitor. The girl. Someone from facilities posted it. Twitter's calling them the Harmony Whisperers." Evelyn didn't move. Her reflection in the window looked like a ghost wearing Prada. "They're demanding an interview," the assistant added. "And a lot of people. They want to know who fixed the Orpheus." She drained the scotch in one long sip and set the glass down hard. "Find his file," she said coldly. "I want everything. I dance when things remember how to sing again." The words were spoken with the easy certainty only a child could possess, matter-of-fact, like she'd just described the color of the sky. But to Evelyn Carrington, they landed like a dropped violin in a cathedral, disruptive, unwanted, echoing, too long. She stood in the HR wing, arms crossed, spine stiff as a nervous coordinator handed over a manila folder marked Wesley Thorne. Red tabs stuck out like accusations, emergency contacts, prior employment, incident-free records, even thank you notes from tenants. No flags, no complaints. Evelyn barely looked at the paperwork. Her eyes kept flicking to the security monitor, which showed the janitor's cart rolling silently across the first floor. The little girl was skipping beside him, humming something faint and lilting. "She shouldn't be here," Evelyn said sharply. The HR rep blinked. "Ma'am, children. In a corporate space. Liability risk. Well, technically she's registered under the Employee Dependent Program. Wesley files the proper daycare waivers. Keeps her with him only when her after-school care falls through. He's within policy." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She hated loopholes. The elevator pinged behind her. She turned. Wesley Thorne stepped out, pushing his cart with quiet grace, like it wasn't covered in rags and rusted polished tins, but priceless china. He paused when he saw her. Then he tipped his chin just a fraction. Not deferential, not rebellious, just acknowledged. "Mr. Thorne," she said. "A word." He nodded once and followed her into the HR conference room. Lily trailed behind him. Alone, Evelyn added curtly, eyes narrowing at the child. Wesley's gaze flicked to his daughter. "Wait, right outside, no further than the bench." Lily nodded, then paused and turned to Evelyn. "It's okay," she said, wide-eyed and sincere. "He doesn't yell." Evelyn flinched inwardly. "That's not what I'm worried about," she wanted to say but didn't. The door shut with a soft click. She leaned against the table, arms folded. "Let me be clear. What happened in the atrium was unprofessional, unauthorized, and potentially damaging to the company's image." Wesley didn't react. "How so?" "You inserted yourself into a corporate demonstration. You allowed your child to perform in front of an international investment group. That's not charming, Mr. Thorne. It's a breach of protocol." He nodded slowly. "You're right." The calm in his voice annoyed her more than defiance would have. She walked to the window, glaring at the cityscape. "And yet, you fixed it." "I did." "How care," he said simply. She turned. Don't be coy. I'm not. That box hadn't been cleaned in decades. The spring had warped. I realigned the spindle teeth using a tension pick and feather wire. The music was already in it. Just needed someone to believe it was worth coaxing out. His words hit harder than she liked. She covered it with a scoff. So, you're some kind of musical savant? No, he said. I used to fix things that mattered to people. Then people stopped believing old things were worth fixing. And now, you mop floors. He met her gaze without flinching. Now, I raise my daughter. There was no apology in his tone. No pride, either. Just clarity. Like the sentence had been tested, worn, lived in. Evelyn looked away. Her fingers tightened against the glass. She's unusually poised, she said, trying to shift the subject. She was born dancing, Wesley murmured. Even when her mom was still alive, Lily would sway before she could walk. There it was, the why. The missing piece HR reports couldn't capture. She doesn't seem fazed by any of this, Evelyn noted. No, he said, but that's what worries me. Evelyn looked back surprised. She doesn't get stage fright, Wesley continued. Doesn't freeze. Doesn't worry what people think. That's good, mostly. But sometimes it's like she's carrying something too big for her chest, like she's trying to keep something alive. That's fading. Evelyn stared at him, unnerved by the accuracy of the feeling. I understand, she said softly before she could stop herself. He nodded, quiet. Yeah, I think you do. Back in her office, Evelyn tried to return to her reports, but her mind kept drifting. To her own childhood. To the brittle silence of recital rooms. The smell of rosin and varnish. The way her father would circle her like a hawk if she missed a beat, as if the wrong note had humiliated him. You don't deserve silence until you've earned it with sound, he'd once said after she cried during practice. She hadn't cried in front of him again. She pulled open her desk drawer and stared at the old metronome tucked in the back. She hadn't thrown it away for some reason. It hadn't ticked in 20 years. Her hand hovered over it, then retreated. She stood, walked to the elevator. Pressed B2. In the underground archives of Meliora Heritage Holdings, behind a locked cage and 3 outdated filing cabinets, Evelyn found the storage unit no one remembered. The low hum of old ventilation fans gave the place a faint thrum, like the bones of the building still had a pulse. And there in the shadows, she heard it. A soft beat. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. She followed the sound. Lily sat cross-legged on a box, tapping a rhythm against a crate with her knuckles. A flashlight balanced beside her. Her eyes were closed. Her body rocked gently like she was riding a rhythm only she could feel. "What are you doing down here?" Evelyn asked, more curious than scolding. Lily opened one eye. "Dad's fixing something. Said I could stay if I didn't touch anything important." Evelyn glanced behind the girl. Sure enough, Wesley was hunched over a gyroscope-style music projector, its gears exposed like the inside of a time traveler's watch. "He says the old ones just need to be heard again," Lily said, standing up. "They're not broken. They're just waiting." Evelyn looked at the child barefoot again, hair-wild eyes impossibly clear. "You dance to broken things." Lily nodded. Not because they're broken, but because they're trying. That stopped Evelyn cold. Wesley looked up. "You came all the way down here to check on our clearance badges?" She shook her head slowly. "No. I came down here because I remembered something." "What's that?" She turned to him, voice quiet. "That I used to dance, too." He smiled gently. Not mockingly, not patronizing. Just knowingly. Then Lily reached out and tapped Evelyn's wrist right where a pulse beat steady under her skin. "You're still dancing," the girl whispered. "You just forgot the music." Are you telling me?" Evelyn said, her voice as sharp as glass, that the janitor in charge of emptying our trash bins used to restore 18th century concert instruments. Her assistant, Madeline Cho, winced slightly but didn't flinch. She'd worked with Evelyn long enough to know that silence was more dangerous than honesty. Not used to, Madeline replied, carefully trained to. Paris Conservatory, apprenticed in Brussels, was flown to Kyoto twice to consult on Koto resonance patterns. That's what the file says. And it's not just resume padding. I cross-referenced with external archives. It all checks out. Evelyn flipped through the folder again, the weight of each page heavier than the last. Every credential real. Every glowing letter of recommendation verifiable. And then the sudden end. 5 years ago. No more concerts, no restorations, just a quiet job application to Meliora's facilities department. No fanfare, no references, just janitor. Why the hell would someone with this background mop floors for a living? Evelyn muttered. Madeline hesitated. There's a death certificate attached. Emma Thorne, wife, deceased in a car accident. Single vehicle collision. Lily was in the back seat. Minor injuries. No charges filed. Evelyn's grip tightened on the folder, and underneath the clinical details, insurance payout, change of address switch, and tax status was something that didn't belong in a corporate personnel file at all. A hand-sketched sheet of music. No title. No tempo markings. Just 5 empty measures. Then a trembling melody line. Faint pencil strokes. Some places erased and redrawn. At the top corner in clean block print for Emma. We'll finish when Lily's ready. Evelyn stared at it for a long time, then closed the file. Send him up, she said softly. When Wesley entered her office 10 minutes later, he didn't carry a mop or tool belt. Just a calm that made her vaguely uncomfortable. Like he wasn't afraid to be there. Like he had nothing to prove. You called for me, he asked. Evelyn nodded and gestured to the chair across from her. He didn't sit. She stood instead. Met him eye to eye. Why are you really here? She asked. Wesley tilted his head. You have the file. That doesn't answer my question. No, he said, but it explains your tone. The room went quiet. Evelyn finally sat pressing her palms together. You trained under Louis Deneau in Paris, consulted for the Tokyo Philharmonic's Antique Chamber Series. You held a full professorship in mechanical resonance acoustics before you were 35. And yet, 5 years ago, you dropped everything. Why? Wesley exhaled. It wasn't a sigh. It was something older, like someone exhaling a long-kept name. My wife, he said. Emma. She was the one who danced. I just built the music around her. Evelyn stayed silent. When she died, I couldn't fix anything. Not the breaks. Not the silence. Not Lily's nightmares. But I could clean. I could show up. Keep the floors from creaking too loud so Lily could sleep. That was enough. But it's not enough now, Evelyn said more softly than she meant to. Wesley looked at her. Who decides what's enough? The woman who locked away a music room for 15 years, that hit deeper than she expected. You don't know me, she said more sharply than she intended. I don't have to, he replied gently. I just listen for what's missing. There was a silence between them that wasn't hostile. It was tuned, like a space that could become harmony if someone dared to play it. Evelyn stood again, walked to the window. Why didn't you tell anyone who you were? Because that's not who I am anymore, Wesley said. That life came with spotlights and expectations. Lily doesn't need a man chasing applause. She needs a father who shows up. Quietly. Every day. She's extraordinary, Evelyn murmured. She moved like she was translating something the rest of us had forgotten. Wesley smiled faintly. She does that. Emma said Lily danced before she ever learned to speak. Said she had rhythm in her blood and gravity in her toes. Evelyn turned to face him again. You left all of that behind to protect her. No, Wesley said. I left all of that behind to become worthy of her. It was the kind of line that didn't need music. It was music. Later that night, Evelyn found herself back in the storage corridor, the one where old instruments waited to be forgotten. She ran her hand over the worn edge of a harmonograph desk, its inkwell long, dried its legs slightly wobbly. Her father used to call it sentimental junk. She used to hide under it with her knees tucked humming Bach under her breath. She hadn't hummed in years, not since the night she struck a sour note at 13 and watched her father snap her violin in half. It wasn't the break that hurt, it was the silence after. Upstairs in her private suite, Evelyn unfolded the copy of Wesley's unfinished score. Her eyes scanned the notes, tentative aching. A melody caught in mourning. She placed it on her piano. She hadn't opened the lid in more than a decade. She let it creak, pressed one key. A ghost of a note filled the room, then another. The sequence was raw, incomplete, but honest. She followed it like a blindfolded traveler tracing a familiar path by instinct. Somewhere between the fourth and fifth bar, she stopped and whispered to the empty room, "What were you waiting for?" Wesley Thorne. Then corrected herself under her breath. No. Wesley Thorne. The next morning, Evelyn returned to the HR office. Madeline looked up, startled. "Is something wrong? Schedule a meeting?" Evelyn said. "With the acquisitions board. I want to fund a new initiative." Madeline blinked. For what? Evelyn picked up the Thorne file, ran her fingers once more across the sheet music. For forgotten things, she said. That just need to be heard again. There are places in every building where the forgotten things go, not the broken things, the forgotten. Down in sublevel B2 of Meliora's headquarters, past the freight elevator and the hallway, no one charted on official tours, sat a locked metal door marked Archival Maintenance, No Public Access. Most employees didn't even know it existed. But Lily Thorne did. She was 8, and 8-year-olds are excellent explorers, especially the quiet kind, the ones who listened more than they spoke, and especially the kind who danced to dust. The room was lit by a single flickering bulb. Shelves leaned like tired librarians holding forgotten instruments no one had budget to restore. A cracked sitar, a dulcimer missing half its strings, a glockenspiel whose keys had turned to rusted memory. In the middle of it all, Lily sat cross-legged on a carpet square tapping the sides of a cardboard box with 2 pencils. The sound echoed like soft thunder. A pattern. 3 beats, then pause. Tap, 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 pause. "A waltz. She's doing it again," said a voice behind a stack of crates. Wesley Thorne emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been hunched over a cylindrical wooden machine, an old gyroscopic sound toy from the 1910s designed to mimic the Doppler effect as it spun. The internal gears were seized with age. Most would toss it. He'd spent 3 nights restoring its whisper. "She's creating a time signature from empty space," he said quietly. Emma used to do that. She could hear rhythm in the quiet between train whistles. Evelyn Carrington stood frozen at the doorway. She hadn't meant to linger this long. She'd only been walking the corridors out of habit or maybe guilt, but the faint echo of rhythm had drawn her like a moth to firelight. "She's not just keeping time," Evelyn said. "She's remembering it." Wesley turned to her eyes unreadable. Some children memorize multiplication tables. Lily memorizes silence. She fills it in with what it should have been. Evelyn stepped into the room cautiously like one might approach a chapel. She glanced at the battered gyroscope on the table, the screws arranged in a neat tray beside it. "You're rebuilding that." She asked what it sounded like when her mother was her age. Wesley said, tone even. This toy was patented the year Emma was born. "So, I'm letting it speak." Evelyn looked down at Lily, who hadn't even noticed their exchange. Her eyes were half closed, her head swaying softly with the pattern of her tapping. "You let her play in here?" Evelyn asked. Wesley smiled faintly. "We don't call it playing. We call it listening." There was something disarming about the way he said it. Not performative, not for pity or show. Just truth quiet and unadorned like the scent of sawdust and brass in the air. Evelyn crouched, speaking directly to Lily now. "That beat you're tapping?" she asked gently. "What is it?" Lily blinked up at her. It's what the broken violin was trying to say. Evelyn's breath caught. "Broken violin, the one in the museum lobby," Lily replied. It didn't know how to talk until Daddy opened it, but once it remembered its name, it wanted to dance. Evelyn stood suddenly overwhelmed. She looked at Wesley. "Does she always speak like that?" He nodded. "She dreams in music, and she doesn't fear memory the way adults do." Evelyn exhaled. Then, glancing back toward the exit, said quietly, "I used to dream like that." Wesley raised an eyebrow. "And now I make mergers happen between people who don't know how to look each other in the eye." "Profitable," he said. "Efficient," she corrected, "but not alive." Later that evening, Evelyn sat in her office with the lights dimmed. On her desk sat a small white box with gold trim, a keepsake music box she hadn't opened since she was 14. It was shaped like a violin case. The tiny crank on the side was stiff with time. She opened it. Nothing, no sound, no motion, just the silence of a gift forgotten. She didn't cry. Evelyn Carrington hadn't cried in 18 years, but she did something harder. She let the silence stay. The next morning, Wesley was mopping the main atrium when Evelyn approached her heels, echoing like punctuation on marble. She was holding something. A file. She handed it to him. "The board's doing a full audit of our legacy assets," she said briskly. "You didn't hear that from me." Wesley raised an eyebrow. "Why tell me?" "Because one of those assets is a 1792 barrel organ from Vienna. It hasn't worked in 15 years, and the man who was supposed to restore it died before he could finish the job." He opened the file. Schematics, blueprints, notes in a foreign hand. "You think I should finish it," he said. "I think," Evelyn replied, "that broken things deserve a second voice." He didn't answer, just stared at the pages. Lily appeared at his side holding her crumpled lunch sack. She looked up at Evelyn. "Will the organ dance if we fix it?" Evelyn crouched to her level. "I don't know, but maybe it'll remember how." Lily nodded. Sometimes remembering is more important than fixing. Wesley smiled. She gets that from her mother. Evelyn held his gaze a moment longer. Then maybe we all have some remembering to do. That night, Wesley returned to the storage room. He turned the final screw on the gyroscope, gave it a spin. The pitch rose and fell as it twirled, creating the illusion of movement even while standing still. Lily clapped softly, and behind her, unnoticed at first, Evelyn leaned against the doorframe. She was humming. 3 notes. Faint, imperfect, but honest. For the first time in decades, she wasn't afraid of being heard. "Are you seriously telling me this thing is insured for $2 million and doesn't even play Twinkle Twinkle?" The European auditor looked unimpressed, squinting at the faded cylinder of the barrel organ like it had personally offended him. His Italian loafers tapped against the floor of the executive exhibition room, impatience in 4/4 time. Evelyn Carrington didn't answer. She stood beside the massive antique like a queen next to a wounded war horse. The barrel organ loomed 8 feet tall, mahogany and brass tarnished with time. Its carved scrollwork was still exquisite, but the silence it carried now was damning. Behind her, members of the audit delegation scribbled into clipboards. A few whispered. One pointed. The museum wing had been her father's pet project. A vanity. A tax write-off. But Evelyn had fought to keep it, even if it meant defending dead instruments to men who didn't know the difference between Bach and a backhanded budget cut. The problem was they were right. It was broken, and in their world, broken meant worthless. "If this organ doesn't function," the lead auditor continued, "we'll need to flag it for deaccession, and that Ms. Carrington would require board approval to dissolve its listed value from the Meliora Asset Registry." Translation, we'll sell it, or scrap it. Or worse, donate it with a plaque that says, "On loan from the estate of someone who gave up." Evelyn turned away, jaw tightening, and that's when she saw him standing just inside the velvet rope janitor's badge clipped to his worn button-down like it was the wrong costume for the wrong opera. Wesley Thorne. He didn't say a word, just nodded toward the organ. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "I'm not asking for another miracle," she said quietly. Wesley replied just as softly, "Good, because this one's going to sound like a confession." They wheeled the barrel organ out that night under the cover of cleaning hours. In the dim light of the restoration sublab, it sat like a relic in prayer. Its bellows cracked its teeth worn from a century of forgotten songs. Lily perched on a stool nearby, swinging her legs. "What's this one's name?" she asked. "Didn't come with one," Wesley muttered, examining the mechanics. "But I'm guessing it remembers a few." Evelyn leaned against a pillar, arms crossed. She wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't executive behavior. But neither was listening to ghosts. Lily hopped down and tiptoed over. "Can I ask it something?" Wesley chuckled. "Sure." She leaned in close to the casing and whispered, "Do you want to sing again, or are you too tired?" A pause, and then impossibly, one of the internal hammers nudged forward just a twitch as if stirred by air. Evelyn blinked. That didn't just happen. Wesley gave a half smile. These things are like people. Sometimes they wait for permission. The next 72 hours blurred. Wesley barely slept. He dismantled the organ gear by gear-polishing brass until it gleamed like river light. He realigned the wooden pins, corrected the tuning pegs by hand, and filed down century-old drags so that the mechanism would breathe again. Lily brought sandwiches. Evelyn brought coffee. No one mentioned the schedule, or the board, or why they cared. It was Lily once again who broke the silence on the third night. "Daddy," she said, tugging his sleeve, "do you think Mommy would have played this?" Wesley paused mid-turn of the crank key. He didn't answer at first. Then, no. She wouldn't have played it. Lily frowned. Why not? Because she would have danced. Evelyn felt the ache of something old crack open inside her. Not jealousy, not grief. Recognition. She turned away, pretending to check her watch, but what she really did was exhale like it hurt. The demonstration was scheduled for Friday morning. The same audit committee returned, flanked by 2 lawyers and an expression that said, "We'd rather be at brunch." Evelyn addressed them briefly, corporate, neutral guarded. Then she stepped aside. Wesley approached the organ in silence. No fanfare, no explanation. Just a man and a machine that had nearly been erased. He turned the crank slowly. The barrel rotated with a metallic hum. And then the first note landed like a single candle lighting an entire cathedral. Not just functional, alive. A Renaissance waltz, rich and layered, spilled into the atrium. Intricate, strange, improvised, but unmistakably beautiful. The sound curled around marble pillars, poured through the open gallery halls, and climbed into the lungs of people who hadn't felt wonder in decades. Even the lead auditor's pen stilled. Evelyn watched Wesley as he played. His hands moved with quiet purpose. Not performative, not proud, just present. When the piece ended, no one clapped, because applause would have felt like a profanity. Instead, one of the younger assistants whispered, "Where did he learn to do that?" Evelyn didn't look at her. She simply said, "He remembered what we forgot." Afterward, as the crowd dispersed and approval forms were signed without eye contact, Evelyn remained behind. Wesley was packing up his tools. Lily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketching the organ in her notebook with crayons. Evelyn approached him. "You know, she said you've now fixed 2 museum pieces that weren't even supposed to work again." Wesley shrugged. "Some things don't want to die. They just want to be asked. And what do you want?" He paused, then looked at her not unkind but clear. "I want to raise my daughter. I want to stay invisible, and I want to keep fixing things no one believes in." She nodded. Then after a beat, "If I find something else broken, should I bring it to you?" Wesley met her gaze. "Only if you think it still has a song left in it." That night, Evelyn returned to her penthouse alone. She walked to the small cabinet behind her bar cart, the one no one ever opened. Inside was a velvet case, a gift, once precious. She opened it. A single ballet slipper rested inside. Worn, frayed at the toe. She slipped it out, turned it over in her hands, and, for the first time in 25 years, Evelyn Carrington hummed. 3 notes, familiar, hesitant, but not broken. The video had no title, just a caption. The janitor who brings broken music back to life, and the daughter who hears it first. It had been uploaded at 3:12 a.m. by a junior staffer from the museum's digital marketing team, someone barely old enough to know the sound of a real barrel organ, let alone the cost of reverence. But by sunrise, the internet knew, and by noon it remembered. There were no flashy cuts, no transitions, just a slow pan Wesley Thorne kneeling beside the organ, his hands stained with polish and brass dust. Then Lily, wide-eyed and barefoot, spinning gently as the music filled the atrium. Her arms rose like wings, and for a fleeting second it looked as if the floor itself leaned up to meet her. The sound wasn't perfect. That's what made it impossible to forget. Evelyn Carrington didn't see the video until her inbox hit 142 unread messages. By then, it had been reposted by 5 classical musicians, 3 museum accounts, and 1 surprisingly emotional TikTok comedian who stitched it with the words, "This is what art looks like when no one's watching." And it still chooses to sing. Evelyn watched the video once, then again, then a third time slower. It wasn't just the music. It wasn't even the man. It was the girl, dancing, not with choreography, not for applause. She danced like she was answering a question no one else had the ears to hear. By afternoon, a reporter from the New York Chronicle was waiting in the Meliora lobby. Just a quick comment, Miss Carrington, was this an official performance? No, Evelyn said, walking past him. It was a repair job. But was the janitor trained? She stopped, turned. He trained life to wait for him. That's more than most executives can say. The boardroom was less forgiving. By evening, she was on a call with 5 department heads, 2 legal advisors, and a red-faced VP who used the phrase brand liability 4 times before taking a sip of his overpriced whiskey. "This man is not part of our public relations strategy," he barked. Neither was the Sistine Chapel. Evelyn replied until someone looked up. A pause. Then the CFO chimed in, careful but pointed. "We're getting messages from the Heritage Preservation Fund, from the Easton Conservatory, even from Paris. They want to know who he is. And more importantly," added the legal advisor, "why we've hidden him in a janitor's uniform." Evelyn didn't blink. "We didn't hide him. He hid himself. But you knew," someone said quietly, "didn't you?" Evelyn closed her eyes for a second. Yes, she had known. Not the details, not the full story. But she'd known in the marrow of her silence that Wesley Thorne didn't belong on the sidelines of history. He belonged to it. Wesley, meanwhile, was unaware of the digital storm. He was in the staff utility room scrubbing Lily's paint-stained sneakers and trying to keep her from gluing macaroni to the underside of his work boots. "Daddy, how many views is viral?" He looked up, puzzled. "Where'd you hear that? Miss Tessa from the museum cafe said I was going viral. I asked if I needed a tissue and she laughed like I told a joke." Wesley smirked. "Viral just means a lot of people are watching." Lily's eyes lit up. "So, they saw me dance." He paused. "Maybe. And you fixed the music." He nodded. "That, too." She chewed on her lip, then whispered, "Do you think Mommy saw it?" Wesley stopped scrubbing. For a beat, there was only the faint hum of a vent overhead. "I think," he said slowly, "if there's any place left where she still watches, it's wherever music refuses to stay broken." Lily smiled satisfied, then handed him another shoe. "Good, because you missed a spot." That night, Evelyn knocked. Not on an office door, not in a boardroom, but at the modest apartment Wesley rented 3 blocks from the train line above a bakery that always smelled like burnt cinnamon and old dreams. He opened the door cautiously. "Ms. Carrington." She held up a tablet, paused the screen. A still image. Lily, mid-spin, arms out, eyes skyward, caught in a moment that didn't belong to time. "It's been seen by over 4 million people," Evelyn said softly. Wesley blinked. "What they're calling her the waltz whisperer." She hesitated. "They're calling you the ghost maker." He looked pained. "That's poetic nonsense." "No." She met his eyes. "That's what happens when people recognize truth wrapped in dust." He said nothing, so she added, "The Chronicle wants an interview. NPR, too. Even the Royal Society of Mechanical Music asked for your contact. They said your restoration technique might be lost knowledge. I'm not interested." Why, he didn't answer. But Lily piped up from behind the couch. "He's scared of being seen," she said matter-of-factly. Lily Wesley warned gently. But Evelyn smiled. "It's okay," she said, crouching down to Lily's level. "Being seen can be terrifying, especially when the world forgets how to look without judging." Lily studied her. "Do you get scared?" Evelyn hesitated. "Yes," she said finally. "Every time I remember what I almost forgot." "What was that?" Evelyn looked toward the corner where an old piano stood covered in folded laundry and unopened mail. "That music doesn't stop. We just stop listening." She left him that night with a folder. Inside, a modest sponsorship proposal. Just a formality, a way to help quietly, respectfully. It included a note. "We don't need to put your name in lights. We just want the music to reach the ears that forgot they deserved it." By dawn, the video had crossed 10 million views. And somewhere in a quiet hallway in the Meliora building, a new sign was posted beneath the restored barrel organ. This instrument was repaired, not replaced. Some things don't need to be new, they need to be remembered. The door creaked softly behind her as Evelyn stepped into Wesley's apartment. It smelled of lemon oil and old paper like a piano workshop tucked inside a library. There was no grand foyer, no polished marble, just warmth and the kind of silence that feels like it's listening to itself. "Excuse the mess," Wesley said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Lily's been decorating." "Decorating or composing?" Evelyn asked, nodding toward the walls. She wasn't exaggerating. Lining the living room was a mosaic of taped-up papers, staff notations drawn in colored pencil childlike drawings of ballerinas floating in pink tutus, and tiny post-it notes scribbled with phrases like, "Don't rush the downbeat," and "Pause before the truth." At the center was a larger sheet. Staff lines drawn with a ruler. Notes penciled in, but not all. Some were crossed out. Others simply floated unfinished, waiting. Evelyn stepped closer. "Is this yours?" Wesley nodded slowly. "It was supposed to be our wedding piece. I started it 15 years ago. You never finished it. I was waiting for the right silence." Evelyn turned to him. "That's oddly beautiful." "Music isn't what you play," he said quietly. "It's what you leave out." In the corner of the room sat an upright piano chipped at the edges, its finish dulled by years of fingers that didn't care about polish. Evelyn hovered beside it, running her fingers lightly across the lid. "Do you play?" Wesley hesitated. "Not since the accident." "You mean Lily's mother?" He nodded. "She was the melody," he said simply. "I was just the technician." Lily popped out from her room, then cheeks smudged with glitter and glue, holding a homemade baton made of a chopstick and ribbons. "Daddy Evelyn has to hear the beginning." Wesley gave her a look. the kind fathers give when they're proud but outnumbered. Lily ignored it completely, hopping onto the bench like she was conducting Carnegie Hall. "She doesn't have to stay for the whole thing," she whispered dramatically. "Just the first 8 bars." Evelyn smiled. "Well, that sounds like an ambush in 3/4 time." Wesley sighed and sat beside his daughter. He placed his hands on the keys. And then music. Not loud, not perfect, but true. The melody crept into the room like a memory trying not to wake the past. There were no flourishes, no grandeur, just a father playing for the ghost of a woman and the heartbeat of a child. Halfway through, Evelyn's breath caught. It wasn't just notes, it was grief in motion. When the last chord faded, Evelyn didn't speak. She couldn't, so Lily did. We call it the day she danced on dust, but Daddy hasn't written the end yet. "Why not?" Lily shrugged. "Because I'm not ready." Evelyn turned to Wesley. He didn't look away. "She thinks when it's finished her mom's story ends too." Lily whispered, "And I want to keep hearing her." They sat in silence for a while. Then Evelyn noticed something tucked into the edge of the piano frame. A faded photograph. A woman in a navy blue dress laughing mid-spin barefoot in what looked like a ballet studio. Her eyes were alight with something fierce and free. She danced. "She was dance," Wesley said softly. "Taught at a community center, ran a kids' ballet program out of our garage. Lily didn't learn to walk. She learned to plie." Evelyn studied the photo again. Something cracked deep inside her. A memory pressed too tightly under success and silence. She saw herself age 9 in front of a mirror. Not in a boardroom, not behind a podium, but in her childhood bedroom arms, outspinning in socks on hardwood floor, pretending applause lived in the creaks. "Did you ever dance?" Lily asked suddenly. Evelyn blinked. "A little. A long time ago." "You should do it again," Lily said with the absolute certainty only an 8-year-old could carry. "Your feet probably still remember." Evelyn laughed, but it shook at the edges. Maybe they did. Later that evening, as Evelyn walked back toward the train station, she passed by the old storefront of a music shop, long closed, covered in graffiti. She stopped. In the reflection, she saw herself. Not the CEO, not the woman with quarterly reports and leather binders, just a woman. And for a moment her hand twitched slightly at her side like it remembered a rhythm her mind had long since filed away. She closed her eyes. Some songs don't end. They wait. Back at the apartment, Wesley tucked Lily in. She looked up at him, sleepy but serious. "Did Mommy really hear the music today? I think she always does. Even the broken parts." He kissed her forehead. "Especially those." As he turned off the light, Lily mumbled into her pillow, "Don't finish the song yet, Daddy. Not until I learn how to dance the ending." Wesley sat back down at the piano after she slept. He stared at the sheet music. Then, slowly, carefully, he added 2 notes. Not the ending, just the breath before it. And in the margin next to Emma's name, he wrote something new. The song isn't waiting to be finished. It's waiting to be danced into life. Hospitals have a particular kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that listens too closely, that feels like it's always waiting to interrupt you with bad news. That's the silence Wesley Thorne stood in now, clutching a clipboard and trying not to look like he was falling apart. Lily lay on the bed, small, and still wires clipped to her chest, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor whispering like a metronome set too slow. The pediatric cardiologist had just left. Diagnosis: congenital restrictive cardiomyopathy, a rare heart condition, genetic, progressive. The doctor's voice had been calm, clinical, as if saying, "We need to act quickly," wasn't a sentence that could break a man's spine. Wesley sat beside his daughter and took her hand. It felt colder than usual. Or maybe his were just shaking. Daddy Lily whispered, her voice thin as tracing paper. "Am I broken?" Wesley choked, just for a second, but he swallowed it down like glass. "No, sweetheart," he said. "You're just playing a very hard song." Lily blinked slow and solemn. "Will Mommy hear it?" He nodded. "She already is." Later that day, Wesley stood outside the hospital elevator staring at the estimate in his hands. $183,000. That was just the surgery. Pre-op recovery medications. Who knew? He'd sold the gyroscope music box already, the Orpheus cylinder, 2 antique tuning forks, even the turn-of-the-century concertina Emma had once held during a rooftop duet. Now there was only one thing left. The violin. Her violin. The one she'd played the night they'd met barefoot under cafe lights in Montmartre while tourists cried without knowing why. He drove back to the apartment without turning the radio on. When he got home, he pulled the violin case from the closet. It still smelled like her perfume. His fingers hovered over the latches. Then a knock at the door. Evelyn Carrington. Again. This time not in heels. She wore jeans and a soft blue coat. Her face had no armor. "I heard," she said quietly. Wesley didn't ask how. Maybe the hospital had called her. Maybe she had a sixth sense for sorrow. "I want to help." No. The word left him faster than thought. Not because of pride, because of something older, deeper. Evelyn held his gaze. "This isn't charity. You're offering money I didn't earn. I'm offering it because you have earned it," she replied. "More than anyone in that marble fortress." Wesley shook his head. "That's not how debt works, Evelyn. Not for men like me." "Men like you?" she asked, voice sharpening. "You mean decent men, father's artists who gave up everything so their daughter could still dance in broken places?" He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Do you know what I envy most about you?" He laughed, bitter. "What, the mop?" "No," she said. "The fact that your daughter doesn't fear you, that she trusts you with her whole heart. You earned that. Every day. That's the kind of man who deserves help." He looked down. "That's not how the world works." "Then change the world," she said. "Or at least let someone change a small part of it for you." Silence. Then Wesley said, voice raw, "She's afraid that if I take something beautiful, it'll mean I owe something I can't ever repay." Evelyn stepped forward until they were eye to eye. "Then don't repay it," she said. "Just pass it on." That night, Evelyn sat alone in her apartment surrounded by the ghosts of oil paintings and acquisitions. She stared at the empty wine glass in her hand. Once her father had shattered a Stradivarius in front of her because she hesitated on a single note. The sound of it snapping had stayed with her longer than any symphony. But Lily's question echoed louder than that memory now. "Did you ever dance?" She got up, walked barefoot across the hardwood floor. 1 step, 2. No music, just the sound of her breath sinking to the rhythm in her head. Her feet still remembered. Meanwhile, Wesley sat by Lily's hospital bed, the violin case unopened beside him. Lily stirred. "Is Mommy mad?" Wesley blinked. "What? Why would she be?" "Because you're thinking about selling her violin." His breath caught. "You heard that?" She nodded slowly. "It hums when you pick it up." He smiled faintly. "No. She's not mad." Lily looked at him too wise for her years. "She wants you to play it." "I can't." "You have to," she whispered. "Even if your heart's tired. Mine is too. But I'm still dancing inside." Wesley turned away, fighting tears. A beat passed. Then Lily said something that undid him. "If you play, I'll dance. Even if my heart's tired." He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he walked to the roof of the hospital just before dawn, opened the case, lifted the violin to his chin, closed his eyes, and played. Not for a crowd, not for the money, not for fame, but for the breath between 2 heartbeats, for the pause between notes, for the daughter asleep 3 floors below, and the woman watching from a city window who once forgot how to move her own feet. and as the music floated into the breaking morning, it didn't matter whether the notes were perfect. What mattered was they were heard. There was no poster, no polished invitation, no banner hanging from the marble balcony. Only a whisper passed from hand to heart. A janitor will play. A little girl will dance. No names, no ticket price. Just come. By dusk, the Meliora Heritage Hall, usually reserved for elite auctions and velvet rope unveilings, had filled with strangers. Not investors, not billionaires, but families. Retired musicians, dancers, children with calloused fingers and dreams too soft for boardrooms. The only light came from amber sconces and a single spotlight aimed at an empty wooden platform. Evelyn Carrington stood near the back, no longer the CEO, in steel-gray suits. Tonight she wore navy blue like she did when her mother used to take her to concerts as a child. In her hand was an envelope folded twice. The string section from a local conservatory sat to one side. No conductor, no printed program, only a hush waiting to be broken. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, measured like someone walking across memory. Wesley Thorne stepped onto the stage. He didn't wear a tuxedo. Just his worn button-up shirt sleeves rolled a small tear at the elbow. The violin in his hands was clean polished, but its neck still bore the faded initials EME scratched faintly into the grain. He stood in front of the crowd and said nothing. No introduction, no explanation. He lifted the bow and played. It wasn't a famous piece. Not something found in orchestral archives or pressed on vinyl. It began with a single trembling note, almost too quiet to hear, like a secret trying to decide if it wanted to be told. Then slowly, the melody expanded, soft, lilting like Emma's laugh in the kitchen, like Lily's footsteps in socks on hardwood, like loss that hadn't hardened into bitterness. The music held its breath, and so did the room. In the fourth phrase, a faint rustle from the wings. Lily stepped out, barefoot, pale blue dress fluttering around her knees like a whisper of water, tiny heart monitor still tucked beneath fabric, but her feet steady. She didn't look afraid, she looked alive, and she danced, not with choreography, not with perfection, but with something more powerful, remembrance. She spun in slow arcs, following the rise of her father's melody, her arms drawing invisible patterns in the air like she was tracing the music before it vanished. The crowd didn't clap. They couldn't. Not yet, because something holy was happening in front of them, something too fragile for noise. Evelyn's throat tightened as she watched. Her own fingers clenched the envelope. Her father's name was on it. The board's formal acceptance of her resignation. But for the first time in her adult life, she felt something unfamiliar. Pride that wasn't built on profit. Love that didn't come with a condition. When Lily did a full turn and paused hands to her chest, the violin dropped an octave. A shift. A memory. And that's when it happened. Wesley faltered. His fingers trembled. Not from fear, but because he realized this wasn't Emma's song anymore. It was Lily's. She had picked it up where her mother left off, and she was finishing it step by step. He steadied, closed his eyes, and the bow danced. Evelyn's breath caught. She remembered something Lily had whispered that day in the hospital. Even if my heart's tired. That line rang louder than any crescendo. It was a prayer and an anthem. By the final note, the hall was no longer silent. It was sacred. Tears. Everywhere. Even the security guard wiped his eyes and didn't bother hiding it. As the last vibration faded into the polished air, Wesley lowered the violin and looked up. Lily was standing center stage, arms at her side, cheeks flushed, chest rising and falling. She looked at him. He looked at her. And for a moment the world narrowed to two souls bound by music memory and something stronger than either. Then a single clap, then another, then all at once the room erupted. But Wesley wasn't watching the audience. He was looking at the woman standing at the back. Evelyn. She didn't applaud. She simply brought her hands to her heart and closed her eyes as if saying, "Thank you, and I'm sorry, and don't leave all at once." And Wesley, for the first time in years, let himself feel seen. Backstage, Lily curled on a padded bench, exhausted but smiling. Evelyn walked up slowly. "You were extraordinary." Lily blinked up. "Did you cry?" Evelyn paused. "Yes." "Good," Lily murmured. "That means you were listening." Evelyn knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm trying, Lily. I really am." Lily yawned. "It's okay. It's not your fault the music was quiet." Evelyn smiled through her tears. And now Lily nodded, half asleep. Now it remembers. Across the room, Wesley packed his violin into the case. He turned to see Evelyn watching him. No words, just a soft look. He nodded once, and for the first time it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like an overture. The final applause still echoed through the stone corridors long after the crowd had dispersed. But inside the old recital hall something lingered warmer than sound, softer than silence. It was reverence, the kind that only comes when grief is met with grace. Wesley stood alone on stage. The lights were dim now, the spotlight off. Just the soft glow from the balcony sconces spilled across the wooden floor. The violin case sat open beside him, the aged maple glinting faintly. He exhaled long and low. "She shouldn't dance tonight," he whispered. Evelyn's voice came from the shadows. "She said she'd only dance if you played." Wesley turned. Evelyn had stepped forward, the envelope still in her hand. "She's resting now," she said softly. "But she made me promise I wouldn't let you pack up until you finished the piece." He hesitated. "I finished it last night." Evelyn tilted her head. "Did you—" He looked down at the stage floor as if the wood itself remembered every note Emma had ever danced to. "No," he admitted. "I only finished the music, not the memory." Then, slowly, he bent down, lifted the violin, and stepped back to center stage. He didn't announce the piece. He just began. This time the melody was slower, more raw. The kind of sound you make when you know something beautiful is leaving but hasn't gone just yet. Evelyn sat in the front row, hands folded, heart braced, and then barefoot footsteps. Lily. She emerged from the side-wing pajama sleeves, pushed-up cheeks still flushed from sleep. Her chest rose and fell, the monitor beneath her dress faintly visible. She was too pale, too small, but her eyes carried galaxies. "Daddy," she said, standing at the edge of the light. "If you play, I'll dance." Wesley stopped. His voice cracked. "Are you sure?" Lily nodded. "Even if your heart's tired?" She smiled. "It remembers how." And so the dance began again. But this time, the room wasn't full. It was just 3 souls. One father, one daughter, one witness, and the floor. The old wood, creaking beneath Lily's delicate steps, almost seemed to sway with her. It was as if the building itself wanted to hold her. Each movement she made carried a weight beyond her years, a grace no studio could teach. She danced not to impress but to remember. Every spin echoed her mother, every lift her father, every pause the space between breaths. When the bridge of the melody came slow and aching, Lily stopped. She placed her hand on her chest, and she knelt, not in exhaustion, but in gratitude, as if saying to the universe, "Thank you for letting me dance this far." Wesley's fingers trembled. The bow slowed, but Evelyn stood. She walked toward the stage and without a word reached for the second violin resting on the nearby chair. It had been left there accidentally by a volunteer. Or maybe, not accidentally at all. She looked at Wesley. "I used to play," she said softly, "before I stopped listening." He gave a small nod. She raised the bow and joined him. The music transformed. Two violins not fighting but conversing like two souls who had walked different paths carrying different regrets but who finally found harmony. Lily looked up, and she rose, spinning between them like a note that belonged to both. In that moment, Evelyn wasn't a CEO. She was a girl again, a daughter who had been told to sit still, a dreamer who once danced in locked bedrooms when no one was watching. And Wesley wasn't a janitor. He was a man who never stopped hearing the music, even when the world asked him to forget it. And Lily was what happened when love and loss chose to keep moving anyway. The final chord was not loud, not dramatic, just honest, the way a lullaby trails off on a child's breath. As the last note faded, the room was still. No applause, no tears, just presence. Lily stepped forward and hugged her dad around the waist. "I think the floor remembers her," she whispered. "It always did," Wesley replied, voice shaking. "We just had to dance loud enough to wake it up." He looked to Evelyn, but she was already walking away, quietly placing the violin back on its chair. As she passed Wesley, she paused. "You fix the song," she said. He looked down. She did. Evelyn nodded. "Then, maybe now, we fix the rest." And with that, she slipped the envelope into his hand. Inside wasn't money, or an offer. It was her resignation letter, folded beside a handwritten note. There's more than one way to be a legacy. That night, Lily slept with her head on Wesley's chest as he hummed the melody she had danced to. Evelyn sat by the window watching the city, not to count buildings, or chase power, but to imagine maybe for the first time what it could look like to give without needing to own, to play without needing applause, and to heal without hiding. The morning sun cut soft lines across the hardwood floor of the old recital hall. Dust motes floated like dancers in a hush that felt sacred. Everything felt slower now. Not heavy, but meaningful, as if the building itself had taken a deep breath. Wesley stood in the center of the stage, Lily's hand in his. She wore a pale yellow dress with tiny embroidered violets. Her cheeks were full of color, again color that hadn't been there for weeks. Her hair, once tangled from hospital nights, was brushed back in a ribbon she had chosen herself. She said this stage held her best memories, Lily whispered, eyes wide. Wesley smiled. She also said it needed better lighting. They both chuckled, the kind of laugh that doesn't erase grief but warms its edges. Evelyn stood at the back of the hall, silent, watching. She hadn't returned to her office in days. The board had accepted her resignation. Some had tried to stop her. Others were relieved. She didn't care either way. She had built an empire. Now she was building something harder, a beginning. Outside the hall, a modest crowd gathered. Not paparazzi, not shareholders. Kids with violins, elderly men in well-worn suits, a young mom holding a toddler who kept clapping at every piano scale drifting from the open windows. Word had spread of a janitor who played like the lost souls of Carnegie, of a little girl who danced like the floor remembered her mother's footsteps, and of a CEO who turned in her title and picked up a bow instead. They weren't famous. They were familiar, and sometimes that was stronger. Inside, Wesley adjusted the mic stand, cleared his throat. He wasn't used to speaking into anything that amplified. For those of you who knew Camille, he began, voice steady but soft. You knew she didn't need a spotlight. She was one. Murmurs of agreement. And for those of you who didn't. He looked at Lily, who beamed up at him. Well, you're about to meet her anyway. The first note from his violin wasn't grand. It was quiet, gentle, like a hand being held for the first time. Lily stepped forward and danced, but this time it wasn't a performance. It wasn't even a tribute. It was a continuation. As she moved, Evelyn quietly joined Wesley on stage again, her second violin lifted in quiet reverence. And something miraculous happened. Children in the back, shy at first, began to sway. An old man near the wall tapped his cane in rhythm. The janitor from Evelyn's old office, weary-eyed sleeves rolled, nodded, and mouthed the notes under his breath. It was no longer a recital, it was a remembering. When the final note came, it didn't land. It lingered, like breath caught in a prayer. The silence afterward was not emptiness, it was fullness, and then a single clap, then two. Then the whole room stood, no roar of applause, just a wave of gratitude. Afterward, Evelyn found Wesley near the piano bench packing up the violin with the care of someone folding a memory. "You're not just a janitor," she said. He smiled. "Never was. And I was never just a CEO." "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "You were the girl who used to sneak into orchestra rehearsals just to feel like she belonged." She laughed. "You remember that. I remember everything he said, especially the quiet parts." Then he grew serious. "Evelyn, what you gave us, what you gave her, it can't be repaid." She shook her head. "It wasn't a gift, it was a return. You reminded me what it meant to give without expecting." He paused. "What now?" Evelyn pulled out a folded brochure. "There's an old conservatory building in the South Loop. Half of it's falling apart. The other half is begging for music. And I'm thinking of fixing it. Together. With me. With us," she corrected, glancing at Lily. "You'll teach. I'll handle grants and budgets. And she—" Evelyn knelt down and looked Lily in the eye. "She'll make sure we never stop dancing." Lily beamed. "Can we call it the Leighton Ward Center?" she asked. Evelyn blinked and smiled. The hyphen goes both ways. A month later, the first open house welcomed children from foster care retired musicians and anyone who thought they'd lost their rhythm. No auditions, no egos, just music, just healing, just home. On the far wall of the main room beneath the golden light of the morning sun hung a bronze plaque. It didn't list donors or titles, just a quote. "Some songs never die. They just wait until someone listens." And underneath, Camille Ward. That night, Wesley sat on the back steps of the center watching Lily draw chalk stars on the sidewalk. Evelyn joined him, a mug of tea in hand. "You ever wonder what she'd think of all this?" Evelyn asked. Wesley looked up at the glowing windows of the music rooms. "I think he said she'd be proudest not of the music, but of the silence we dared to break." Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder. No more silence, then she whispered. No more pretending he agreed. Just then, Lily looked up. "Daddy," she said, "can we dance now?" He nodded and stood. No violins, no stage, just Chalkstar's twilight and the soft rhythm of feet learning to trust the ground again. And that was their story. A story about music healing and second chances. About a janitor who never stopped believing in grace, a CEO who learned to listen beyond numbers, and a little girl whose dancing brought two broken hearts back to life. But now it's your turn. Where are you watching from? Leave us a comment and tell us your city or country. We read every single one and we love hearing from you. And if this story touched your heart even just a little, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories that remind us all of the beauty in kindness, resilience, and love. Every view, every like, every comment you help keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep listening for the quiet songs. You never know who they're waiting for.